Hello, this is Susie Kennan, Texas PTA President-elect. I'm also the governance chair for Texas PTA, and so I wanted to take a few minutes to go over with you some of the governance changes you'll see over the coming fiscal year. I wanted to start with a comparison of your bylaws. A lot of folks that are coming up to the council level for the first time don't understand or don't realize that there are some differences between the local and the council templates. And so I just wanted to point out some key differences as you start your year. Councils are required to have 4 meetings versus locals who have to have 3. The quorum is also very different. In a council meeting, the delegates are a percentage of your local PTAs within the council. And then you have to remember that your council executive boards don't count towards that quorum, right? So you can't have a vice president on your council who was also the president of a local PTA count for both. So they would have to be counted as an executive board member, and then they would have to have an alternate from their local PTA come to the council board meetings in their place. Hopefully that makes sense. Quorum for a local PTA is a number that's established of paid members that's established in their bylaws. Most of our PTAs have 10. Membership in a council of PTAs is a local PTA needs to be active, and then they also need to have paid their council dues. That's in order for them to participate in the business of the council. They can still come to your meetings, but if they haven't paid their dues and they're not active, they cannot vote or make motions. So just remember that. For membership in a local PTA, they must have paid their dues for that current year. The voting body is very different. In a local, it is paid members that are present. In a council, it's going to consist of a specific number of several different things. The first group is the accredited delegates or alternates from each local PTA. Your bylaws as a council will say how many delegates each PTA should have there, 1, 2, or 3. And remember, if your bylaws say more than 1, then each of those people should both be attending your council meetings. It's not one or the other. They don't share the role. If it says 2 delegates, then you should have 2 council delegates. They should both be attending your meetings. It also includes the officers of your council of PTAs, as well as your standing committee chairs. So your entire executive board is part of the voting body. And then you'll have the president or the president's alternate from each local PTA, the principal or the principal's rep from each local PTA. And then if you happen to be in a community PTA, for every council, you'll have the superintendent or the superintendent's rep. But if you happen to be in a community PTA, you would have one from each school district that your community of PTAs represents. So hopefully that helps as you move into the year, just recognizing those differences as you move into your first meeting. So let's talk about the template amendments. They're going to be effective August 1st. The process that we use to come up with amendments is any leader can suggest an amendment to the bylaws templates for both council and locals. Sometimes it comes from another committee. Sometimes it comes from just a leader that sees something within the templates that they think may work better differently. However we get those suggestions, all of those suggested amendments go to the governance committee. They look at them, determine what they think should be approved and not approved. Once they've been approved by governance, we send those to the board of directors as recommendations, and then ultimately the board of directors approves whether or not those template changes are going to take place. All of those template changes are automatic. They do not require a vote from either the local or the council PTA. They are just automatic. We control the template, so any changes we make don't require a vote. Now remember, if your locals or councils make changes to the rest of the pieces that they're allowed to change, that does require a vote, but these template changes do not. They'll be distributed at launch. They'll also be distributed as a 1-pager in the membership card boxes that each PTA will get this year. So hopefully we reach every PTA by one of those 2 methods. So let's talk about the changes. The first one is a change based on a change that National PTA made to their bylaws. The template, they left this principal section in here in their template, but what they did was they deleted This next part, this policies part, Texas PTA felt that these policies were very important, and so we have left those in there, but we have created a new article for them. So none of this language is new. It's just in the very next article down from the principles. So none of this should be surprising. It's all been in there forever. It's just now kind of in a different place. The next one is we clarified the number of people per position. We were still getting some folks that thought co-chairs were okay. Texas PTA has long had a policy that co-chairs are not, they are prohibited. Each board member can only serve in one capacity. And so now we've just written the words, hoping that that will be clear enough. We say that they may only be filled by a single person, and in parentheses, we have actually written the words co-chairs are prohibited. So hopefully that is much more clear to our locals. We also, throughout the templates, both templates, wherever it said committee chairs, in case that could be ambiguous or confusing, we changed it to each committee chair. So we hope that that has made that much more clear for them to understand that that is not allowed. For the financial reconciliation piece, this is an example of something that a leader brought to us and that the governance committee and board of directors agreed with. We have taken out the requirement that the financial reconciliation committee needs to be appointed at least 30 days before the last either delegate for council or membership for a local meeting of the year. The rationale was that the financial rec can't be done until the end of that fiscal year anyway, so it makes the last membership or delegate meeting of the year completely sufficient time for appointment of that committee. And so now you can just do that at the last meeting of your year versus having it have to be 30 days before that last meeting. So hopefully that makes life easier. And we also clarified this language. This does not change how this process was done. It just puts the process in writing. When there's a vacancy outside of your initial election meeting in the spring, there was confusion about whether that election was took place back in front of the members or at an executive board meeting. And so we've written it in here that takes place at an executive board meeting. You, after that initial spring election meeting, you never go back before your members to fill a vacancy. It's always done at the executive board level. And so we added that in both templates and in the president-elect model as well. For special meeting notice, there was questions that came up about what the notice should say and what can be done at special meetings. And so we've written that. Again, this is not a new process. It's just putting the process in writing. The notice has to include the place, date, time, and purpose, and no other business may be conducted but what you've stated in the notice as the purpose of the meeting. So hopefully that helps you with your locals as they're trying to understand what they need to do when they post notice. That sentence that's deleted, notice may be waived by the members of the executive board as provided by law. That was in the council template. We didn't quite know why, so we talked to our the attorney, and they said that that it was probably best just to remove that sentence to simplify the way that we conduct special meetings. So that's what we've done. We talked to our parliamentarian about duplicative numbering. He told us that when you're using numbers 1 to 99, you should spell them out. And with the exception of if you're doing dollar amounts, then they should be in number format. So that's what we've done. And we won't have duplicative numbering anymore. It'll be one either written or the number format, but not both. So we've gone through both templates and simplified that. Now this is a big change. We're changing the training requirement language. And really the big change is around the principal. Everybody is still required, everybody else besides the principal is still required to take foundations, lead orientation, welcome to PTA, and serving on a local PTA executive board. What we did was we changed the requirement for principals, that they no longer will be required to take foundations, but that they will be required to take basics, principles, and PTA. And the reason for that was because We wanted to tailor the message that they received, the information that they received that was really particular to what principals need to know. It'll still include, you know, some finance components. It'll still include all of the pertinent information, but it will be more tailored to principals. There was some concern at Lone Star Leadership Weekend amongst the councils that this would kind of infringe on their principals and presidents training. And we don't want that to be the case, but because this will be online as well, what we want is for you to be able to build on this course. And then also if you ever have the opportunity to have your principals and presidents together, that you would focus more on relationship building, goal setting, team building, those kinds of things, versus having to be the deliverers of all of the details. So hopefully you'll see the value in that as well. We made some conforming changes around that to make that work under the secretary, as well as under the executive board members. We just used some language there to clarify that there's a caveat for the principals. We've also added the training requirements under each officer specifically. So president will say number 1 and number 2, president-elect will say number 1 and 2, secretary will say number 1 and 2. And that's so should in the future we want to add any additional training requirements, we can go ahead and it's easier to go ahead and make those additions. So this is the rationale to that. I'll leave it there for a second just so you can look at it, but I just explained all of that to you. We clarified the intervention timeline just so that it was much more clear. As you can see, we used a few more words to describe each phase. We have not changed the phases at all. We just used more words to be more clear about how each of those phases work. The one change that we did make is highlighted in yellow. It says, with cause, Texas PTA may place a council or a local PTA that has not met all good standing requirements into the intervention phase early. The reason for adding that particular caveat was so that if there's a local PTA that's in any stage of revocation, we don't have to wait 60 and then 45 days. We can immediately put them into the intervention phase and have a support team in place to assist them to get out of revocation. Same thing with the council. For instance, if you haven't attended Lone Star, or you don't complete your fall council activity report, we don't have to wait those required days. We can immediately get you some support to get get those things corrected and get you back into good standing. So those were those changes to the intervention timeline. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the standing. That's the end of, the template changes. That's all we have this year. If you have any questions about those, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll help you. We can talk through whatever your questions are. I wanted to go over quickly the standing rules. The review process is so you know that they need to they have a process to follow at the local campus. They have to either give notice or not. That changes what the vote is at the general meeting or the membership meeting. Go through all of that, and then they submit those to us through the form site form. They need to submit that to us in a Word document, and it needs to be properly formatted. Our volunteers, just like your volunteers, a lot of times they don't have time. We expect that turnaround to be very quick, about 10 days. So they don't have time to fix formatting and that kind of stuff. So, or convert them from a PDF to a Word document. So that they need to come to us in a formatted Word document. They're going to receive one of 3 responses. It's either going to be approved as submitted, or the most common, which is approved with editorial changes. And then the third is that it's going to be returned for action needed by either the executive board or the membership. If they get either one of the last 2, there will be a document that will have the reviewer comments and recommendations in like a track changes format for them, so that they can see exactly what's been recommended and why. But like I said, the most common is the approved with editorial changes. If you're training your locals on standing rules, please let them know that that our timeline for approval is, we say to give us 4 to 6 weeks, but we try to turn them around much quicker. We try to get our committee to look at them within the first 10 days. Where the hangups tend to occur is when we have to reach back out to the local PTA and have a conversation to get some questions answered, or to just kind of understand what their intent was so that we can determine whether it's going to be editorial or actually need to go back for another vote. Those sometimes connecting becomes a problem. So as you're training your folks on standing rules, please let them know that they need to be available and actually return those phone calls or emails when they get them, just so that they understand exactly what's needed, and our committee members can go ahead and get those standing rules processed. For resources, I did want to go to the standing rules, the sample standing rules. Of course, it's probably not going to work in this particular case. Let's exit out of here and go find them, so that I can show you exactly how to use the sample standing rules. So, and these are found on our website. So they can just go to the governance section and find the sample standing rules. This first page is all about instructions, and it's gonna using the sample as I'm gonna cover these pieces right here. But encourage them to read that first page. The way we have this laid out is, over here is the sections and the recommended language. And then over here we have instructions, and then further to the right we have the rationale. So PTAs will have to sometimes make choices. If a decision is required, we've put it in red so that it's very clear that they need to make a choice. And then they would make that choice over here. So we've given them the example, and then they would have to choose how they want it to look over here. And here's another example where there's 2 changes that need to be made, or 2 decisions that need to be made. They'll need to choose if they want it, how they want their delegates selected, and then in what month. So sometimes it's just insert as is, which would be this whole language. But again, if it's in red, they need to make a decision. We get standing rules back all the time that still have these blanks. So so we just wanted to make sure that you understood how this sample set is to be used and what each column was for, so that you can train your local PTAs on how to do this. Just so you know, the biggest one that we get back that has to go back is has to do around electronic baking. There are some choices they have to make within that. And so just make sure that they understand when they need to make a choice, and that they do. So that's the sample standing rules. Hopefully that's helpful to understand what that looks like. We've added the scholarship language to tell you this is, and I'll tell you right now, if they will use this language and make these choices, their standing rules are going to come back much quicker, because there's very little for us to review. So just continue to reinforce that with them so that they understand that is a great resource for their standing rules. Let's see what else we have here. So for policies, I wanted to touch on this really briefly before I let you go. We have several available policies. The ones in green, the conflict of interest and the records retention, those are policies that you have to review and approve every year at your local or council PTAs. They're kind of not optional, you have to do them. The yellow ones, the e-commerce, the social media, and the consent for minors, those are policies that if your PTA wants to use those particular things or do those particular things, these are the policies, this is the policy language for them to use. Now remember that policies can be included in your standing rules, or they can be standalone policies. Now, if they do standalone policies, They have to do them every single year. The members have to approve them every single year. It's the required language that's in these policies. And then sometimes there's choices like on the e-commerce policy that have to be made within that language. So they need to make those choices before they present them to their members. So remember, if they're in the standing rules, they only have to be reviewed every 3 years. If they're standalone policies, they have to be done annually, okay? Now the blue ones, the dues refund and the credential distribution, those are Texas PTA policies. So just so that's kind of how you know the difference. All of these policies are under the governance section of the website and available for you to download whenever you may need them. So I think that's it. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. I'm happy to talk through any questions or concerns you may have about how to implement any of these changes. But that's your governance update. So have a good one.